Hi there, welcome to this video from In 28 Minutes. I have some great news to share with you. That's basically that Spring Boot 2.0.release was released at the start of this month. Now, is that all? Nope, I have even further great news. That's basically that all our courses are now upgraded to Spring Boot 2.0.0 release. That's basically within 2 weeks of the official release, we have now upgraded all these courses. In this video, we would want to give you all the details of the upgrade. We would want to give you what exactly has changed, how are really the Spring releases version, Spring Boot actually releases version, and we'll look at the release notes, and also we'll try and see what are the updates that are done to our course projects. Before we get there, we would like to thank you. We would like to thank you for helping us reach almost 150,000 students. Yes, that's right. It's 150,000 students. So I'm excited to reach that milestone. And also, I should thank you for the awesome feedback that you are providing on all our courses. Your feedback is essential to make sure that we keep our courses updated and make sure that they are meeting your needs day in, day out. Let's jump right in. What are the updates that we are doing right now? Most of our courses are using 2.0.0.M3 Spring Boot and Finchley M2 as Spring Cloud version. Right now, we are upgrading to Spring Boot 2.0.0 release, and the Spring Cloud version which we'd be using is Finchley M8. I'm really happy that this combination is a very stable version. I did not really have any problems with this. 2.0.0 release is a Spring Boot final release, so it's kind of very stable. So I hope we would have much easier learning experience. Before we get into all the details, let's look at how Spring releases are versioned, right? So the life cycle of a Spring release starts with the milestone releases. After that, we get into the release candidates, and finally there is a released version. So if we look at this, we have a number of milestone releases. So we had the first milestone release M1 in May, and after that we had milestone releases from M1, M2, M3, and so on up to M7. And after that, the first release candidate was released in Jan 2018. We had released candidate 2, RC2, in Feb 2018. And finally, the V2.0.0 release was early March. This is typical of all the Spring releases, and this is also typical of Spring Boot releases as well. I mean, there are not really a lot of them. This is just the second release of Spring Boot, but I expect this to continue in the future as well. What I've done is to make it easy for you, I have extracted some of the important things from the release notes. If you really want to go through all the release notes for everything is present in here. So I've provided all the links in here. You can download the PDF from the link of the video. I mean, you should find it in the description of the video. You can find all the details in there. At a high level, the important updates are to the actuator, number of changes to the URLs of the actuator, big Spring security upgrade. One of the important things that's changing is how Jackson serialization works by default for dates. Earlier, dates were treated as timestamp by default. So we had to do some setting to prevent that from happening. But now that's disabled. So dates would be treated as dates without any need for any setting. The changes on the Spring Boot side from M3 to now are kind of very basic. However, there are bigger changes on the Spring Cloud side. On the Spring Cloud side, one of the important decisions that was made was to remove the Zipkin stream server. So in start.spring.io, you would not be able to create this Zipkin stream server directly. So you need to actually now download the Zipkin server and run it on your own. We'll look at it a little later when we talk about the details. And also, a number of artifacts are renamed. So we would see the details a little later that a number of artifacts like Eureka, Zool, all the things that we would talk about related to Spring Cloud have been renamed. One of the important things that Spring 2.0.0 release brings in is Java 9 compatibility. So you can use Java 9 by doing this, but one of the things I've found is there are a few problems when we use things like JPA. You need to add additional dependencies. One of the dependencies is present in here, JAXP API. This is because of the modularity thing that comes in along with Java 9. Typically, whatever is in the class path is available to your project, right? That's not how Java 9 works. Java 9 brings in even fine tuning of that. So you kind of create modules and you can only access things that are in the class path of your module. Don't worry about that. The important thing for you to remember is that if you're using Java 9, make sure that you add this dependency in, especially if you're using JPA. That's the important high-level overview from the release notes. Let's now get to the specifics of what's changing directly with respect to the code. Let's start with a few things related to the actuator. One of the first things is the URL of the actuator, right? So earlier with Spring Boot 1.5, the URL for actuator was HTTP localhost 8080 actuator. And in the early releases of 2.0.0, it was changed to localhost 8080/application. And now we are back to localhost 8080/actuator. So if you're using 2.0 release, the URL would be 8080 actuator. And also to enable actuator, all that you need to do is to do management.endpoints.web.exposure.include is equal to star. The other thing which is changing is Spring security. Earlier, to create a default user ID and password directly from the application.properties, we did security.username. Now it's spring.security.username, and similarly the password is spring.security_user_password. And also when we tried to hard code the user ID and password inside Spring security configuration, we used in-memory authentication. And with the recent release, you definitely need to provide a password encoder. So earlier we just needed to do auth.in-memory authentication with the user in 28 minutes. It's no longer sufficient right now. You need to also add a password encoder in. So this is how you need to add a password encoder in. We're also making a few changes to the courses to make internationalization easier. Earlier, we used a request header as a parameter to each method that needs to be internationalized. We used to pass in the locale as a request header in here and use that locale to get the property from the message bundle. However, you don't really need to do that anymore. If you use the accept header locale resolver, you can directly get the locale using the locale context holder .get locale. This would be much more easier, especially if we are doing internationalization in multiple methods. This would be much more easier to do. The other important changes are related to Spring Cloud and the microservices. There are renames of number of artifacts. Most of the Spring Cloud artifacts are from Netflix OSS, Netflix open source software. So what has now changed is explicit renaming of all the Netflix related stuff to use Netflix in the name. So Starter Zool is now started Netflix Zool, Feign is started Open Feign, Eureka is now Netflix Eureka. One more important thing is earlier the client for Eureka was Starter Eureka. Now it's Starter Netflix Eureka client. The Starter Eureka server is now Netflix Eureka server. Starter Ribbon is Starter Netflix Ribbon, and so on. Hystrix is Starter Netflix Hystrix, right? The other thing which is changing is how you enable sampling for Spring Cloud Sloth. Earlier we needed to create a new instance of an always sampler. This class is no longer available. The way we can create an always sampler now is just say sampler.alwayssample. So this is a static variable which is directly present in the sampler class. We can make use of that. The biggest change is Zipkin. The Zipkin server is no longer available as part of start.spring.io. Earlier, we were using Zipkin UI, Zipkin Stream, and Stream Rabbit as the dependencies on start.spring.io, and we created a project on start.spring.io, and we import it and start it. But that's no longer the process of how you would create a Zipkin server. All that you need to do now is to download a Zipkin jar, and we would use this command to have that listen for messages on the RabbitMQ. Once you have this up and running, Zipkin would start listening on it, and you can see whatever is happening with your microservices as part of the Zipkin dashboard. The PDF also contains details of which sections are updated and what are the videos which are newly created or updated, and also it contains the details of the complete patch. So you can click the link in here and you can go and get the patch which has all the details of all the things that are changing as part of the 2.0.0 release upgrade. I mean, I'm talking about our specific courses. Okay, there you go. Those are some of the important things that you need to be aware about the Spring Boot 2.0.0 release. Not a lot of changes. The most important ones are related to Spring Cloud, a number of artifact renames. The biggest one is the change to the Zipkin server. Other than that, it's kind of minor improvements here and there. If you have any problems with any of the updates, just post a question in the forum and I should be able to respond back to you. Once again, I would like to thank you for helping us to reach 150,000 students. And also, thank you for all the awesome feedback that you have provided. Thank you. And until I see you, bye-bye.